Today I'm going to show you how to cook a true, authentic South Louisiana Cajun Jambalaya. Now first I want to say the camera work's probably going to be a little shaky because I have no one here to hold the camera, and obviously I need one hand to do a lot of the cooking. So if you'll forgive me for that, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, to start off with, you're going to want to use a cast iron Dutch oven. And the reason that you need cast iron is most people realize how cast iron cooks better. It cooks evenly. It helps impart flavor into the food. But you have to have some type of cookware where you're going to get some sticking of your food. Non-stick cookware doesn't work for jambalaya. And any of the Teflon coated or the copper coated stuff, it just doesn't work. You have to have, at a minimum, stainless steel or cast iron. Okay, so once you have a cast iron Dutch oven or some type of cast iron cookware ready to go, I'll show you what we're gonna use. First, I've got 1 pound of sausage. Now let me tell you about the sausage. You really need to use a pork sausage. And I know outside of South Louisiana that can be hard to find. Actually, about 3 months ago when we had went to see my son graduate Army basic training in Oklahoma, he wanted me to cook a jambalaya while I was there. And I had a really tough time. I had to go to 3 stores. You know, I know in other places it's hard to find. I know some recipes call for andouille, but andouille is not in real Cajun jambalaya. So do your best to try to find some pork sausage. This particular sausage is actually a green onion sausage. You can see that in there. And I didn't buy this for any other reason than it was on sale. I'm not partial to any particular brand of sausage as long as it's made out of pork. I usually just buy what's on sale. Okay, we have 1 pound of pork. The kind of pork you need to use is a fattier cut of pork and generally a darker cut. If you'll notice that these pieces here, they're actually pretty dark, and there's a good bit of fat on the pork, and that fat is what's going to add the flavor to your jambalaya. Now, we're kind of spoiled here, and we're lucky because we can just go to the store and buy jambalaya pork. But all jambalaya pork is it's pork that is cut up and ready to go, usually from a Boston butt. Sometimes I'll cut my own jambalaya pork out of a Boston butt. You can use country style ribs or any type of the darker red, fattier pork is what you're going to want to use. You're not going to want to use something like, say, a pork loin or something like that because it's a lighter meat. It's too lean. There's no fat in it, or very little fat in it, and it's just not going to work to get the flavor that you're looking for. And we're going to have onions. This is 2 onions. A rule of thumb that I use on all these 3 things here is for every 2 cups of rice, I use 1 onion per cup of rice, and I use 1 pound of sausage per 2 cups of rice, and I use 1 pound of meat per 2 cups of rice. And like I said, this is going to be a 2 cup jambalaya, so I have 2 cups of long grain rice. It's important to use long grain. There's really is differences in rice, and medium grain does not really cook as well inside of a jambalaya, so go with the long grain. As far as our spices go, we have 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and if you're using fresh ground black pepper, you may want to back off a little bit from the 1/2 teaspoon and use a little bit less because, as you probably know, fresh ground black pepper is a little bit more intense flavor, so you don't want it to be too peppery. And we're going to use 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. If you don't have minced garlic, you can also use garlic powder, but you probably need to increase the amount of garlic powder used to help get the garlic flavor. We're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of hot sauce. And the hot sauce, this is not Tabasco or any of the super hot brands. It's basically just your more milder brands of hot sauce because you're not wanting the jambalaya to be hot. We have 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper and 3 teaspoons of oil. And that's basically all we're going to be using. Now, one thing that you're not going to see here is tomatoes. And I can't say this strongly enough. Authentic Cajun South Louisiana jambalaya does not have tomatoes in it. And I know if you live anywhere other than South Louisiana, you probably have always assumed that it did, because all the recipes tend to show that. Well, you know, there's a town here in South Louisiana that hosts the annual Jambalaya Festival, with the Jambalaya Festival cook-off every year, where hundreds of people compete. And not only is there no tomatoes in their jambalaya, tomatoes are not even allowed. So I'm going to show you how to cook jambalaya the right way. I've let the Dutch oven heat up for about 5 minutes on medium-high heat. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cooking oil, and then I'm going to add my meat. Now you want to add your hot sauce. And stir that around. When your meat gets about halfway done, you can go ahead and put in your sausage. Just let it sit on top for a few minutes, and then when it's time to stir the meat again, you can stir the sausage down, because the sausage doesn't take near as long to cook. You can see there's still some liquid in the bottom of the Dutch oven, and what we're looking for is to be able to get all that liquid out, because we're going to use a specific amount of water, and we don't want to lose any water or add any extra water. I'm not sure if I've been saying it, but I've been stirring it about every 2 to 3 minutes. But now you can hear there's kind of a sizzling in the bottom. That means that our liquid is gone, and we're starting to get a little crust on the bottom of the Dutch oven from the meat. And that's what we're looking for. That crust, and it's going to be a little more than that, but that's what's going to form not only the color but the flavor of the jambalaya. So you want it to get crusty on the bottom, but you don't want it to actually burn. And there's a fine line there, but you just have to keep watching it and keep checking it more often. I'll probably be checking it about every minute now. I'll stir it and see how it's looking. Yeah, right there is what we're looking for. When you're stirring your meat, you want to be sure and not scrape the bottom of the Dutch oven right now. Like I said, you want this stuff to stay down there. So you just want to kind of move your meat around. So I think that's about does it for our meat. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out, and we can add our onions. I'll lower the heat down to medium-low, and I'll go ahead and add the onions. You don't need to add any water or anything, because the onions already have a lot of water in them. You just want to kind of stir them around, get them broken up. They're gonna cook down nicely anyway, but you don't want to stall that process by having big clumps. At this point, I am going to cover it, and I'm probably going to let it cook for about probably 8 minutes, and then I'll come check it. All right, it's been about 8 minutes. We'll check on these onions and see how they're doing. You can see the color that's coming from the meat, and it's kind of getting on the onions right here. And then the onions, of course, themselves, when they cook down and caramelize, will create more color and more flavor. So they got a little while to go, so we'll go ahead and get these covered. and let them cook a little bit more. All right, another 6 minutes and we'll see how they look. They're coming along pretty good. Not quite done yet though. I just don't want to go too long between checking them and have them start to burn. So we'll put those on for probably another, say, 6 minutes or so, and we'll check them again. All right, it's been another 6 minutes, so we'll have a look at them. And they are coming along nicely. Now the reason that I timed them for 8 minutes and then 6 minutes and then 6 minutes was mainly because I usually cook my onions down for about 20 minutes. So that's, that's just a good way to break it down and have some good intervals for checking them. So now that we've cooked down our onions for about 20 minutes and we got a nice caramelization on them, what I did was I increased the heat to medium, and I'm going to stand here and I'm going to watch the onions and stir them every so often, because just like with the meat where we wanted a good crust on the bottom of the Dutch oven, we're going to want a good crust to come from the onions and the leftovers from the meat. So I'm not going to stir them probably every minute or so, but I'm just going to stand here and watch them and stir them as needed. So when they're done, I'll show you what it looks like. Our onions have cooked down, and you can see there's a nice crust on the bottom of the Dutch oven, and that's what we're looking for. So at this point, we're ready to go ahead and add our meat back in. Stir that around. I'm going to increase the heat to high, and we'll put in our water. And remember earlier in the video I said we don't want to add any extra water, which is the point of cooking all the water out of the onions and the meat, and we don't want to lose any water. So what we'll do now is we're going to bring this to a boil after we put in our seasonings, but we're only going to let it boil just for a minute or two to kind of let those flavors combine, and then we're going to add our rice and cover it because we don't want to lose any water. Otherwise the jambalaya ends up being too dry. So we'll go ahead and put in our salt, black pepper, garlic, and our cayenne pepper. Mix that around real good. And what I'm also doing now at this point is I am scraping the bottom of the Dutch oven so we can pull up and scrape off all of that flavor that came from the meat and the onions, so to mix in our water and give us just what we're looking for. So now we'll just wait for this to come to a boil, and then we'll add our rice. Now our water's been boiling about a minute and a half, so I can go ahead and put in the rice. Stir all that around. Now we don't have to wait for it to return to a boil because it's obviously still boiling. Go ahead and lower the heat to low, cover it, and we'll come back and check on it in about 15 minutes. It's been about 15 minutes. So now what you want to do is you want to lift your rice. You don't want to stir it. You just want to lift it to let the water that's pooled up on the top drain down to the bottom. Just want to put your spoon all the way around. Lift. And we'll put the lid back on and we'll go for another 15 minutes. It's been another 15 minutes, so our jambalaya should be ready. You can go ahead and stir it, get everything mixed in well. Be sure and scrape the bottom of the pot also, so you don't get anything burning down there. I apologize about this fogging up. I purposely used my cell phone rather than the camera because the camera fogs up so much easier with the steam. But I actually ran my cell phone down, so I'm trying to finish up with this. So there you have it. Real authentic Cajun South Louisiana jambalaya, no tomatoes. I'm going to turn the heat off and I'm going to sit the lid on it like this for just about 15 minutes, give it some time to rest, and after that I'll put some on a plate and we'll have a look at it. And there it is, real jambalaya, no tomatoes.